right. No, that's all right. I'm here.
Welcome to the Wilton Community Center, and before we do anything else, let's give Fred Grunder a round of applause for putting this event together tonight. The only bad thing about a crowd of this size is that the Kaufmans can no longer claim credit for the sole ability to get a room this full in Wilton, Iowa. Although I think about half the people here Fred owes money to. I think that's why they're here. Thank you for being here tonight. This is an event that Fred came up with and pulled together. We're so thrilled to have so many Republicans here tonight. And I hope we have some independents, and I hope we have some Democrats who are thinking of switching over. And if you're one of those people, let me especially welcome you tonight. If you're somebody who has not yet been involved in local Republican politics, let me especially welcome you tonight. Everybody likes to say how important the next election is. And sometimes that's rhetoric. It is not rhetoric. We have vitally important races from the courthouse all the way to Washington, D.C. They're going to be decided this November. We have real bread and butter issues, dollars and cents, the direction that we want government to go here in Muscatine County and in our neighboring counties, all the way to the kind of representation that we want to see in Washington. And so it's vitally important. And you might think there's nothing you can do. Let me assure you that there are candidates in this room who want and need your help. There's candidates in this room who've never run for office before, who don't really know exactly what they need from you. Volunteer. Give them some money. Help them out. Talk to your friends. Get on Facebook. It is vitally important that we engage as much as we possibly can in this upcoming election. So our format tonight is Jeff Kaufman is going to be the moderator. We've had people submit some questions. We also have other questions. And I've taken some questions. Some of you asked things that were similar. We've tried to synthesize them together. So Jeff Kaufman is going to be the moderator. He might accidentally auction off a cake or pie in the course of that. Give freely. Speaking of giving, Fred, through his own generosity, took care of the arrangements for tonight. There are envelopes on the table. If you would like to make a donation to help defray some of the costs of this, that would be wonderful. That would help the party to conserve our resources for other things. It would be a wonderful thing. But Fred has done this on his own behalf and in his own interest in helping our party move forward. With that, I'm going to introduce somebody who doesn't need to be introduced, but loves the attention. So I will introduce him. Jeff Kaufman is somebody that I consider to be one of my most important political mentors and personal mentors, and also just a good friend. He's somebody who helped me 4 years ago when I was running for county attorney and didn't know anything about politics and how to run for office. He helped me do events and do literature drops in Wilton. He just was always there. He's somebody who's kind of the backbone of our local party. He's also somebody who, if you are a delegate to our district convention, who's put his name forward to be on the state central committee. And I'm supporting Jeff at that convention. I would ask you to do the same. Jeff, former state legislator, he got promoted to be a county supervisor in the last cycle. Jeff Kaufman.
I'll take that. Now you can hear me. All right. Well, let's start with the invocation. Welcome to Wilton, Iowa, first of all, home of the Beavers, or more commonly called God's country, right here. And let's start with our black belt mayor, Ira Bowman. I'm not kidding. The guy's got a black belt. That's why I call him sir. He just calls me sir because he just feels like he has to. And that's it. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight to Wilton, and I really appreciate you coming out. I hope you enjoy our beautiful community, and I hope this is not the last time we see you here. I'd really like to thank all of the candidates that came out tonight. I personally am interested in hearing what they have to say and meeting each and every one of them.
And I hope you're as excited about that as I am, and obviously you are, you wouldn't be here. So I'd just like to welcome everybody to Wilton, and thank you for coming out.
Well, you can hear me now because I've got a big mouth. So we want to start. We got a whole lot of people for you to meet. So first thing we're going to do is allow the congressional candidates to talk to you, then our state and local candidates to talk to you, and then finally we're going to have our debate with 4 out of our 5 United States Senate candidates. Okay. So we have 4 of our 5 Republican candidates for the United States Senate. Senator Joni Ernst wasn't able to be with us, but we're going to, she has a proxy to speak for her, and we will allow her to address the group first, and then we'll start with the debate with the 4 gentlemen.
Hi everyone, my name is Josie, and I'm glad to be here on behalf of mother, soldier, and proven conservative Joni Ernst. Joni wanted me to pass along a message. She was hoping to be here, but unfortunately she was stuck up at the Capitol getting that hard work done. So I am here instead. The most important thing to remember about Joni is that she is running on a proven conservative record here in Iowa. She has served at the local level as a former Montgomery County auditor, at the state level as a current state senator with a proven track record, and she's also served overseas in the Iowa Army National Guard, leading a company in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So she's got a lot of leadership and military experience. Throughout her time in the state Senate, she has worked hard. She has fought back against the government overreach that is Obamacare. She has consistently stood up for life and for our Second Amendment rights. And she has also worked to help pass the largest tax decrease in Iowa state history, with over $4 billion in tax relief coming over the next 10 years. As your next United States Senator, Joni will continue to work hard on behalf of Iowans. So I'm here today to ask for your support of Joni. She has been endorsed by a number of individuals. Governor Mitt Romney, Governor Sarah Palin, and Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds have all endorsed, as well as a number of local and state officials. So I would ask for your support. If you are interested in helping out, I have these yellow cards in the back. If you would just fill that out. So thanks so much for your time.
Also, just a reminder, when we're done, most of the candidates are going to stick around if you want to talk to them one-on-one, and I know they'll be here as long as they can. They got incredibly busy schedules. So we will start with the debate. I'm going to stand up I'll just stand up at my seat to let them know when there's 30 seconds left. They're going to start with 2-minute introductions, and then they're going to have 90 seconds each to answer the questions. We're going to take questions from some of the questions that you folks put in. There's a few others that came in ahead of time. We'll get through as many as we possibly can. And the other thing I want to know, so you just understand the ground rules, if one particular candidate calls out another candidate specifically by name, that candidate will get 30 seconds to rebut. And when we get to the very end, we'll have 1 minute closing. So we will now begin with our candidate, Matt Whitaker, and good luck, gentlemen. Thanks for being in Wilton tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Matt Whitaker. I'm running for the United States Senate. I'm not a career politician. I'm a small business owner that's created jobs in Iowa, not in skyscrapers, but in single-story buildings with metal roofs. For 5.5 years, I served as the presidentially appointed United States Attorney for the Southern District of Iowa, which you're sitting in right now. In other words, I was a federal prosecutor that put bad guys in jail. The greatest title I'll ever have is husband and father. Some of you may remember I paid for college by playing football for Coach Hayden Fry at the University of Iowa. I was on the last Rose Bowl team for the Hawkeyes as an academic All-American, 3-time academic All-Big Ten. And it's where I met my wife, Marcy. And we've been married for over 20 years. We have 3 kids, Calvin, Allison, and Lincoln. And I'm concerned that those 3 are part of a generation whose quality of life and economic prospects aren't as bright as their parents, and who are inheriting an American dream that is not as bright or as solid as the one I inherited in 1988 when I graduated from Ankeny High School. I'm running on a simple platform, and I learned it from Ronald Reagan. That platform is that we need to defend our freedoms, because if we don't, government expanding will cause the contraction of liberty. I'm looking forward to this debate. I'm looking forward to talking about the important issues of the day, and I'm looking forward to earning your support. Again, my name is Matt Whitaker, running for the U.S. Senate, and I'm asking for your vote on June 3rd. Thank you.
Our second candidate is Scott Shaven. Scott, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. My name is Scott Shaben, and I'm an everyday Iowan ready to represent everyday Iowans every day in the United States Senate. Like most of you, I am a lifelong resident of the state of Iowa. I was born and raised in western Iowa. College wasn't the right thing for me after high school, so I enlisted in the United States Navy. I had the opportunity to do the operation and maintenance of the Tomahawk weapons system. So if you turn on the news at night and you ever got to see a big ball of fire going off the pointy end of a boat, that's what I did. I learned the value of a college degree the hard way, so after 6 years and an honorable discharge, I attended Iowa State University where I earned a degree in marketing. I've spent my life in retail, working my way up to management, and I've come to realize the value and the importance of this seat. We need to have somebody that can unite our party and help expand our party. My message is a pretty simple message. I like to put more than just words to things. So balancing the budget for me just isn't enough. I like to actually create a path to solvency. You balance the budget, you're still $17 trillion in debt. When it comes to Second Amendment, anybody can get up on a stage and say that they'll support and defend the Second Amendment. I'd like to take it a step further. There's about 250,000 concealed carry permit holders here in the state of Iowa, and if I'm fortunate enough to become your next United States Senator, I'll introduce legislation for a 50-state concealed carry permit that the everyday American can attain. Lastly, thirdly, everybody can agree Obamacare has to go, but lastly, as a veteran, as the only enlisted veteran in this race, I would like to see to it that our veterans know on their date of discharge exactly which benefits they will or will not receive before ever leaving their last command. If we owe somebody a limb, they're going to get a limb. If we owe them a hearing aid or a pair of glasses, they'll get that. And most importantly, if they've had an experience where we feel they may need somebody to talk to, maybe not today or tomorrow, but someday in the future, they'll have it in writing and they won't have to wait 4 to 6 weeks for that to happen. I encourage you to pay attention to us candidates tonight because you're going to hear a lot of stuff, and I think I'll set myself apart, and I hope I earn your support tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And just a reminder to the crowd, when I stand up, they still have 30 seconds left. I'm just giving them a little caution. Our third candidate is Mark Jacobs. Mark?
Jeff, thank you, and it's great to be here this evening, and thank you all so much for being here. This is an incredible facility, and very much appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. The most important thing I'd like you to know about me this evening is that I'm a business guy. I've never run for any political office before, never held any office before, and I think we would all agree that Washington is broken. You know, Congress today has a 9% approval rating. I read somewhere that makes Congress less well received or less positively viewed than cockroaches. Now, I'm not sure who the 10% are that like cockroaches, but at any rate, I think that's very telling. And I think the question is, what is it going to take for us to have elected leaders? I got to tell you, from my standpoint, we deserve people in Washington who will work for the people of this state and get things done. And that is not happening today. So what is it going to take? I think sending the right person to Washington is important. And I think leadership and experience matter. Earlier on in my career, I had the opportunity to be brought in as chief financial officer of a company by the name of Reliant Energy. When I joined Reliant, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. And the day I walked in, I was standing across the table from 23 of the world's largest banks that thought they were going to dictate what was going to happen. And I stood up to those banks, and I wasn't going to settle for a short-term solution, and I wasn't going to let them take over control of the company. But I worked with them, I pushed them, and through a lot of cajoling, we were able to negotiate a long-term extension that gave the company the opportunity to have some breathing room. We went on within 21 months and repaid every penny we owed that group of banks, and in the process protected thousands of jobs. So I know what it's like to inherit a fiscal mess, but more importantly, I've learned in the private sector how to work with people to get things done. And I think that's what's missing today in Washington. Thank you.
And our last candidate is Sam Clovis. Sam, you got 2 minutes.
Good evening. Is this thing working? This campaign is about finding someone who will go to Washington, D.C., who will have the courage and the commitment to fight for liberty. It's about liberty. And it's about fighting for that liberty that we have to go there and find people who will go in and be able to take apart things that impose risk on you, impose uncertainty on you, impose those things on you that cost you money and cost you the future of your children and your grandchildren in this country. It's imperative that you vet the candidates and you vet them hard, because what you don't want to be is fooled. You don't want to be fooled by someone who's going to be different on January 6, 2015 than they are on January 4th. It's very important that you take a hard look at each candidate that you see, every candidate on this stage, everyone running in this race, and you find the person that you believe will fight for you and do the things that are necessary to bring liberty back into this equation. Remember, as government expands, liberty shrinks, and this is about preserving liberty for ourselves and for posterity, the charge of the United States Constitution. I look forward to this debate and this chance to discuss these important issues with you.
We're going to start into the questions now. They'll have 90 seconds. We're going to rotate who goes first. I would ask that I wanted to make them feel a good Wilton welcome here at the beginning, but let's hold the applause until the very end so we get more questions through. So I'd ask for no applause until we get all the way to the end. So we will start then with Scott Shaven. And Scott, this comes from the crowd, and all 4 of you, very straightforward. What would you do to increase jobs and help the middle class? 90 seconds.
That's a great question. You have to have somebody that's willing to fight for less regulation and somebody that's willing to get the government out of the way. The most important thing that we need is certainty. And the most uncertain thing in the job environment right now is the Affordable Care Act. The employer mandate isn't there today. It's been kicked down the road past an election, and we never know if it's going to actually become law. We're hoping that it doesn't become law. But that's just one level of uncertainty that's out there. They say if you're going to open up a business today, on day one you need to have an attorney, an accountant, and an HR department, because if you don't have those 3 people working for you on day one, on day 2 you're going to need that attorney. We need to have an environment that is conducive to people being comfortable and not afraid to open up businesses and put their name on top of a door. We create that environment, then you'll have people willing to hire people and willing to actually take a chance and open up their own business and create competition and help out the economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Mark, what would you do to increase jobs and help the middle class?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand is what's the role of the government in creating jobs. And contrary to what President Obama and Congressman Braley may think, my view is that the federal government does not create jobs. But it does create an environment that makes growth in the private sector and our businesses either easier or more difficult. And I don't think there's any question that every step along the way, President Obama and Congressman Braley have made it more difficult for the private sector to grow. There are 5 things I think we need to do to get our economy back on the right track. First is a focus on community colleges and vocational schools. One of the real challenges we have in this country today is a skill gap. In many cases, there are good jobs available out there. We just don't have people that have the right skills. Nationwide, 4 million unfilled jobs because people don't have the right skills. Number 2 is energy policy. We've seen over this last decade a dramatic increase in the number of good-paying jobs as we've increased our energy production in North America. We need to continue to open federal lands and waterways to that. Number 3 is government regulation. Now, don't get me wrong, we need good regulation, but we have gone way too far. One of the things I think we need is an independent cost-benefit analysis of new government regulation. 4th is tax policy. We need to simplify our tax code and bring down marginal tax rates so we can bring jobs back to our shores. And finally, there's Obamacare. 2.5 million less people are going to be working because of Obamacare. I'm sorry, the president would like to spin that and say that's a good thing. That's a bunch of malarkey. The core problem in America is not enough people working, and we don't need a major piece of legislation that pushes 2.5 million people out of the workforce.
Sam, what would you do to increase jobs and help the middle class?
I think fundamental is the repeal of Obamacare, and this is the dismantling because it's not practical for us to say that we're going to repeal it in 2015 as long as President Obama still sits in the White House. But we can start to take it apart. The next issue is to take on Dodd-Frank. This is the financial reform bill that we have out there. This is creating all kinds of havoc in our lending industries. We have our big banks that are protected, the small banks that are not. And anybody here that's familiar with small banks, particularly independent banks in Iowa, realize the stress that they're under. I am for fundamental tax reform. I think if we cannot repeal the 16th Amendment and get to a fair tax, which is a national sales tax, we must change the corporate tax rates in this country, and overnight the economy would change. I see us moving from above 35% corporate tax rate to 10%, allow money that is now harvested overseas to be brought back to this country at the same tax rate. It will incentivize investment from foreign countries into America as well. It'll bring trillions of dollars of capital back here to be reinvested, and almost overnight we would be able to start to see the creation of jobs in this country and the clearing of our unemployment. One of the key factors here, one thing that can be done right now is starting the XL Keystone Pipeline. This is absolutely ridiculous that we don't have that.
Thanks, Sam. Our second question, we will start with Mark Jacobs.
Is it okay if I answer?
Oh, yes, it would be okay.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with some of these answers, but you know.
Now we'll let you weigh in. What would you do to increase jobs and help the middle class?
Thank you. We need to get government out of the way. Fundamentally, there is a recipe that has worked for America over many, many years since our founding. And it's a simple recipe. And the first two parts are we need reasonable regulation. And whether it's getting rid of Obamacare or whether it is getting Dodd-Frank out of the way and interfering with our small businesses, it is this current and continued movement in our nation to aggregate and consolidate power into our nation's capital. In 1960, Detroit, Michigan was the wealthiest metropolitan area in the United States. Today, the wealthiest metropolitan area in the United States is Washington, D.C. We need to reverse that trend. We need to get government off the backs, and we need to get a government that issues a new regulation every 2.5 hours to roll back the size and scope of our federal government and its regulatory burden. And then we need fundamental tax reform. You would all agree with me that taxes are not reasonable right now. And the middle class is bearing a unique burden in this tax scheme. And so I would want to see those first two pieces, a regulatory burden taken off the backs of our small businesses and our families, a tax structure that's simplified and easier to comply with, and then free trade, a stable currency, which no one would argue today that we have a stable currency based on what the Fed's doing with their balance sheet. And then finally, the protection of private property rights, which I know is important to our moderator. Thank you.
Our second question, Mark, how should the IRS and our tax code be streamlined?
Well, the IRS tax code, as I understand, is about 70,000 pages worth. And there's no question that what we have today disincentivizes businesses from investing and creating new jobs and encourages companies to locate jobs in factories overseas. And that is absolutely wrong. We are in competition with other countries for jobs, for factories, and as someone who was previously CEO of a large energy company, I can tell you firsthand, I've looked at a lot of capital investment projects, and the tax impacts often made the difference between a project that got the green light to go ahead and one that didn't. We need to bring down the marginal rates on job-creating businesses, and we need to simplify the structure we have and get rid of all the special interest loopholes we have. And through creating that type of environment, I believe that we can be competitive. We can help be part of the solution here to rebuild opportunities for businesses to invest and create those jobs that we also desperately need.
Sam, how should the IRS and our tax code be streamlined?
If we repeal the 16th Amendment, there's no need for an IRS. And then with no need for an IRS, we can move to a national sales tax, which is the fair tax. I'm a strong advocate for the fair tax. This is, I think, is a very important aspect of this. It saves us about half the money we're spending right now on welfare because of the prebate structure that goes into this particular type of tax code. It does away with capital gains tax. It does away with the death tax. It does away with excise taxes. It does away with all of the corporate taxes. It goes right to the tax on final goods. These are the things that we really have to, it will reshape the economy almost overnight. The hardest part of this is educating the public on the fair tax. And this is one of the things that I'm trying to do in this race, is to work on the process of educating people and doing this. We have a lot of advocates now for the fair tax that are now in Congress. I hope to be the next voice that joins that chorus that's growing in Washington, D.C. to get to a fair tax, because I think the fair tax is eminently progressive. It is one that allows people to pay in based on what they want to purchase, and it's absolutely the fairest and best form of taxation we can get in this country, because it taxes consumption and not the hard labor of your lives.
Matt, how should the IRS and our tax code be streamlined?
A fair tax is a great idea, as long as we can repeal the 16th Amendment. I do not trust members of Congress if we have another way for them to tax us through a national sales tax and have the income tax in place. I don't trust that they won't tap into that vein also and take even more than what they're taking now, which is at a federal, state, and local level, the highest tax burden we've ever had. One of the things that I should note is that 7 out of every 10 new jobs is created by a small business. And I'm a small business owner, and I know how it works. And a lot of small business owners in this room know that you're not corporation. So a corporate tax isn't going to affect you at all. You're a pass-through entity, or you're self-employed on a Schedule C. And so you need tax relief at the individual level. The hardest thing to do in America right now is to hire your first employee as a small business owner. It is way too complicated, and we need to unleash entrepreneurs and innovation by getting this tax burden and this regulatory burden off of small business owners. I also know that over the last several decades, startups, and they may be big startups that you know as a name brand now, but startups have created every net new job in our nation's economy. And so we need a tax code that is simple, that is flat, that encourages growth and innovation. I also know that as we lower taxes, we will see an increase in revenues, as Art Laffer has shown in his studies and his academic research.
Scott, how should the IRS and our tax code be streamlined?
That's a great question. I don't want to sit here and repeat what's already been said, and somebody on this stage has a very great line for when he's the fourth person, so I'll save that for him. I agree. If you go to something along the lines of a national sales tax, there are a few things you have to be on the lookout first, and that's the repeal of the 16th Amendment and repealing and getting rid of the IRS. You have to have something that, as the slogan says, flatter, fairer, and simpler. 70,000 pages of tax code. I mean, I wish it'd be as easy as saying take the top 20,000 and set it on fire, but that's not really plausible. But it does need to be simplified. And like I said earlier, on day one of opening up a business, you need an attorney, an accountant, and an HR department. That accountant's there for the tax law. You can't expect somebody, and that's one of the biggest fears, is you open up a storefront, if you don't know the tax code and you don't know what to expect out of the IRS, you could be in a world of trouble. So we do need to have something that's streamlined. We do need to start closing loopholes for corporations and work for something that's as flat and as simple to understand as possible, because even the first people that started passing income tax had no idea it would ever get to the point of being 70,000 pages.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our third question actually comes from our host, Fred Grunder. We'll start with you, Sam. Explain your position on border security and immigration reform. Please emphasize your position on the subject of amnesty.
Thank you very much. I have a little bit of experience with this. In 2006, I had the opportunity to write a policy paper for the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services on the implementation of McCain-Kennedy. The bill was brought up in 2005 and then processed again in 2007. My position then has not changed. It is seal the borders, not a gnat gets in for the next 4 years. Then start the process of registration. begin the process of registration of those who are here illegally in this country. If we can find out 40 billion cell phone calls a day, we can find out where the people are that have overstayed their visas. We have the NSA to help us with that. The whole next piece here is very important. If a person is here illegally, habitual criminal or a felon, they're deported. If a person has used any form of identity fraud to obtain benefits or otherwise, they're deported. Any company that knowingly hires an illegal alien is fined and fined repeatedly for those issues. So we create those disincentives for this factor. Anybody that's left here after we go through that process is then registered. They're given temporary residency status. They're allowed to stay here for 10 years in good behavior, pay their fines, back taxes, all those other features there. But at no time is an individual given a path to citizenship or the right to become an American citizen without first returning to their home country and then applying legally and getting to the back of the line like everybody else.
Matt Whitaker, explain your position on border security and immigration reform. Please emphasize your position on the subject of amnesty.
In 90 seconds, go. As a United States attorney, I enforce the immigration laws. And I have visited the border in Texas, and in Arizona, and California, and in the state of Washington, and I've seen them pull 5 individuals out of the back of 4 tourists. I've seen a young woman wedged behind the bench seat of a pickup truck, and I know that our border is constantly under assault. And so, first, we have to secure the border, and we have to have it verified as secured. Second, we need to then embark on fundamental immigration reform. But the one thing that I do not believe needs to happen is we do not need amnesty, and we do not need a path to citizenship. We are a rule of law country. We have laws, and when people break our laws, there are consequences for breaking those laws. In the United States, as a United States attorney, I enforce those laws, and I held people accountable for violating our laws, including the immigration laws. And what I see is a current administration that does not enforce our immigration laws in the interior. We have de facto amnesty now. And I don't believe, as some of the other folks on the stage may, that we need to give illegal immigrants to our country any status, because I don't trust then the courts or judges won't just then ultimately give them the rights of U.S. citizens. We are a rule of law country, and we need to make sure that if you came here illegally, that you have to do it the right way and get to the back of the line instead of jumping to the front of the line.
Scott, explain your position on border security and immigration reform. Please emphasize your position on the subject of amnesty.
Thank you. First and foremost, we must secure our borders. There's more to our borders than just a fence. And before we look at any sort of reformation, we have to secure our borders first. I liken it to balancing the water chemistry in a swimming pool. One of the multiple jobs I had in my illustrious career, at one point I used to sell and service hot tubs. And one thing I can tell you is this: whether it's a hot tub or a swimming pool, if your water chemistry is unbalanced, if I'm sitting on one side of the pool dumping in balancers, whether for pH, alkalinity, or chlorine, if you're sitting on the other side with a garden hose pouring unbalanced water into the pool, I can put chemicals in all day, and we're not going to have a balanced pool. Not until somebody goes to the other side and turns off that spigot will we ever be able to balance the pool. And that's the same thing when it comes to our population. We will not be able to balance who we have here until we stop the flow in. There's more to it than just, like I said, than just a fence. In 1996 and in 2004, Department of Homeland Security said they were going to round up people that have overstayed their visas. Right now, using their numbers, there's over 1 million people here that have overstayed their visas, and only 32% of them have come here over land. That leaves you your airports and your seaports. We must track down people that have overstayed their visas, and then after all that stuff is done, then we can reassess what to do with the people here. But until we have the border thoroughly secured, there needs to be no talk about any sort of amnesty or anything like that. Thank you.
Mark, explain your position on border security and immigration reform. Please emphasize your position on the subject of amnesty.
Well, to me, it's inexcusable that we cannot secure our borders. We have to start there. We next need to hold our employers accountable to make sure that the people that they're employing have the legal right to be in this country, our federal government needs to make sure that they provide the tools to employers so that they can do that. I do not support amnesty, but I do support the idea. I believe that people who are here illegally have committed a crime, and I think there should be a consequence for having done so. I do believe that once fine or retribution has been made, I support the idea that those individuals could stay here under a guest worker program, but I do not support the idea that anybody that originally came to this country illegally could progress on to citizenship or to voting rights. You know, we talk about immigration a lot from our southern border. I also want to touch briefly on high skill immigration. You know, many of our regent universities are continuing to expand the number of people from foreign countries that are there. Many of these are science, technology, engineering, and math students, very high skill, would like to stay in this country after they graduate in many cases. Our legal immigration process is an absolute disaster, and in many cases we are spending our time and resources and energy to educate these students that could add a lot of value to our society, and then they don't have the opportunity to stay in our country, and I think that's wrong.
We'll start at the beginning. Matt Whitaker, this question has to do with gun control. Briefly explain what the Second Amendment means to you, and would you support any further gun laws? If yes, please explain what you believe is needed.
Again, as the United States Attorney, I enforce the firearms laws, and we have plenty of firearms laws on the books right now. We have a whole regulatory scheme that attempts to keep guns out of the hands of folks that shouldn't have them, whether they are felons, whether they are the mentally ill, or whether they are domestic violence and abusers. What I know is that guns and our Second Amendment freedoms are just as important as our First Amendment freedoms or our Fourth Amendment freedoms or our Eighth Amendment freedoms. And so I have been an outspoken advocate for our Second Amendment rights. I think they are some of the most cherished rights that we have. I exercise my rights. Someone once said that the average American has 3 guns, so I'm above average in that count. And I think it's important. I have worked with the NRA as their local counsel. My firm was involved at the very start of the Iowa Firearms Coalition, so I have been active and involved in Second Amendment issues in the state of Iowa, both as a U.S. attorney and in private practice. And it is something that I will go to Washington, D.C. and stand up for Second Amendment freedoms against this administration, who seem to be determined to continue to infringe on this.
Scott Shaven, briefly explain what the Second Amendment means to you, and would you support any further gun laws? If yes, please explain what you believe is needed.
I think the Constitution spells it out perfectly. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I don't believe in the government infringing on our rights. As I stated in my opening statement, as for more regulation, I guess, I would work for a 50-state concealed carry permit. That's something to help the everyday citizen be able to travel our country freely. If you go too much further east of here, and you have a concealed carry permit, and you're trying to have something to defend yourself here in the state of Iowa, you have to pull over to the side of the road and put something in the trunk. Otherwise, you become a criminal in the next state over. And that, to me, is not right. We need to be able to keep and bear our arms, and it should not be infringed upon. So I will do everything in my power to ensure that our Second Amendment is protected. Thank you.
Mark Jacobs, briefly explain what the Second Amendment means to you, and would you support any further gun laws? If yes, please explain what you believe is needed.
Well, I think, we need to start this conversation on understanding where our rights come from. I believe they come from God. And I believe that the Constitution and the Second Amendment in particular makes it very clear that the right to bear arms is not to be infringed upon. And that's something I believe in very deeply. I am a gun owner. In fact, my 13-year-old son for Christmas this year, he got a shotgun, his first gun, and I had the great opportunity as a father this last Saturday to take him out shooting for the first time. And we shot some clay pigeons, and the little guy actually did pretty darn well. I was impressed with him. But, I think that's, people own guns for all sorts of different reasons, but you can count on me to stand in strong support of the Second Amendment.
Sam Clovis, briefly explain what the Second Amendment means to you. Would you support any further gun laws? If yes, please explain what you believe is needed.
Second Amendment is given to us to protect the First Amendment, and if it were not for the Second Amendment, we would not have the First Amendment. And I think that those protections are very important. I've been endorsed by the Gun Owners of America, and their executive director, Tim Macy, called me and asked me on the phone. He said he went through this process, and Tim made a very important comment I think that I need to share with you. He says, we're going to support you, we're going to endorse you, and we're going to do it because we not only think you'll vote right, we think you'll fight for us. And that's where I am. I think I'll fight for gun owners in America. The thing that I see that's most critical about this whole notion here, that gun ownership is about the protection of property. Private property is the absolute fundamental cornerstone of America. The protection and the ability to accumulate private property is what this nation fought a revolution for. This is what it's about. And those rights that we have are protected by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment comes right to the very heart of not only protecting property, but protecting ourselves and our families. This is critical. And it also, I think, helps protect us in the fact that 100 million gun owners own 300 million guns in this country. This is a gun culture. This is a gun nation. This is a nation that understands and responsibly uses firearms every day. And I don't think we need the United States government telling us how big the magazines need to be, or how many shots we can shoot, or how places we can go shoot them, because anybody that owns a gun and owns it responsibly is going to take care of that.
The next question is rather long, so I'm going to read it once, and if you want it repeated, I will do so. But I want to read the whole thing. I think it's insightful. And we'll start with you, Scott. Most people agree we need a strong national defense, but we also have a debt crisis that has continually expanded with our deficit spending. Besides waste and corruption, give an example of something that you feel could be eliminated in our military budget that would not reduce our military capabilities. Scott.
Off the top, that's a great question, and off the top of my head, there is one program that does come into mind. And I'm going to preface it with this. Before being a Senate candidate popping off saying we need to cut this program or that program, or cut somebody else's job away, if I am fortunate enough to become a United States Senator, I'll take the input of the military before cutting anything. Just this past week or last week, the Admiral in charge of 7th Fleet had stated that the LCS program was unfit for, or not suitable for the Pacific Fleet. The LCS is the Littoral Combat Ship, which is basically it's a small, funky-looking craft that is designed for speed and agility, mainly in shallow waters. And this admiral didn't feel that it would be suitable for the rough seas of the Pacific. That being said, he was saying that you could cut, I think it was 21 out of the 30 ships that are already pre-ordered for the Pacific Theater. So that'd be one program, I guess, you could cut. And that would be based, and again, it would be based solely off of input from those that are in command. Thank you.
Art Jacobs.
Okay. I think you first have to address this question by understanding the role that the military plays. I think that's one of the fundamental responsibilities of our federal government is national defense. I believe very strongly in a strong military. I think that makes our diplomatic efforts elsewhere far more effective if they're backed up by a strong military presence. I think we have a lot of opportunities, and what we need to do is to modernize our military. We have built a military that was originally designed to be able to fight 2 wars on different parts of the globe at the same time. And the nature of the threat that we're facing today has changed. 20 years ago, we could have pulled out a map and with geographic borders defined where the bad guys were. Today, that's much more difficult because it's driven by ideology and not so much by geographic boundaries. And I think the nature of the threat that we're facing has changed, and that means we need to update our military. We need more special operations forces. We need to make sure we're very adept at cyber terrorism, countering that, and also countering the use of drones. We talk a lot about how our federal government has used drones, but that's something I'm very concerned about, is how drones, whether they be subsea, terrestrial, or in the air, can be used against us. And I think we need to make sure our military is well equipped to defend against the changing nature of the threat.
Sam Clovis.
I have a little bit of experience with this. I've spent a lot of my time when I was in the military dealing with program addicts and a lot of the issues. I was there for the drawdown in Vietnam. I was there for the drawdown after Desert Storm. And I can tell you, as long as we maintain readiness and modernization efforts, we can do pretty well. I am very concerned because we have a re-emerging threat, I think more of a conventional threat, and I agree with Mark's assessment about the changing threat. But one of the things I think, and I will tell you this, I have the scars to prove this. I have the scars to prove this. The one thing that will save billions of dollars in defense spending is interoperability. We have far more independent parochial procurements that take place in the military for radios, for computers, for all of these issues that we ought to be able to come to some agreement that a radio that works for a Marine ought to be able to work for a soldier, ought to be able to work for a pararescueman, ought to be able to work for a sailor. These are the things that we have to get to, and right now we are spending billions of dollars on independent procurements in our military that if we went through a full interoperability study and a full interoperability purchase, we would save billions of dollars in our defense funding and not affect readiness and modernization at all.
Matt Whitaker.
There are areas within our military as well as areas within our federal government that we can find savings. The first issue is to not buy defense systems that our generals and our leaders in the military don't want or don't need. Second, we can find an ongoing strategy that looks at the mission of our military, how it's deployed, both within and without our country, where we have bases, and make sure that those are reconciled to the threats, both asymmetrical and symmetrical. And like anything else, we need to work towards a balanced budget. And that will include the military as being part of that, where we have to find savings. But I would also, the premise is we can find a lot in the federal government, whether in defense or other places, on just waste, fraud, and abuse. There's billions of dollars to be found. And as a U.S. attorney, I saw that and I held people accountable for that when there was waste, fraud, and abuse in our country. But everybody is going to have to pitch into this. We need to make sure that the military is ready and modern and is deployed appropriate to the risks that we face as a country.
Another question. This one is also long, and I'll say it once. If you want it repeated, just catch my attention. And this we'll start with Mark Jacobs. Obamacare is a mess, and most polls show the majority of Americans do not want it. But most people agree our healthcare system and health insurance system needs improvement. What changes would you initiate that would make our healthcare system better and make health insurance more affordable for the people? And is there any part of Obamacare you would retain?
Well, I support the idea that we should repeal Obamacare and start over. I don't think there's any question that as I travel this state and talk to people, Obamacare is hurting families here. I think the other thing I'm concerned about is Obamacare doesn't, to me, tackle the core problem we have in healthcare, which is the continued escalation in costs. And, I was up in north central Iowa not long ago visiting with one of our county auditors up there. And I heard a story from her that I've heard from people all over the state, that she gets her health insurance from her employer. She pays a portion of that, as many of you out in the audience do. And her contribution piece of that each year for the past 5 years has gone up faster than her raises. And so her net take-home pay has gone down every year for the last 5 years because of rising healthcare costs. So how can we tackle that? Well, I think there's a couple things we can do. Number one is we need to deal with abusive lawsuits that cost doctors a tremendous amount of money in terms of the malpractice insurance they have to buy, that cause a lot of unnecessary tests among our medical professionals. And I think we need to bring some of the principles of free markets. Patients need to understand the cost of services they're providing and what value they're going to receive. I mean, think about it. When you go to the grocery store, you pull an item off the shelf, you look at it, you know what the price is, you know what value you're going to receive, and you can make a decision to either put it in your grocery cart or put it back on the shelf. And I think healthcare ought to operate that same way, with price transparency and choice all built around the patient.
Sam Clovis.
I think it's again, we have to take a practical look at this, because what could happen in 2015 with the new Congress, and for 2 years we have to deal with the president being in the White House still, and so repeal is not on the table. I think we have to repeal parts of McCarran-Ferguson, which is the law that established state insurance boards. This allows for the interstate sale of insurance, which is very important. About half the medicine that's practiced in this country today is defensive medicine. The other thing is to provide a federal backstop for tort reform. This allows tort reform diffusion of policy across state lines. This is, again, I think something that's very important for us. We have to get rid of the comparative effectiveness research and the independent payment advisory board. I would like to see antitrust laws imposed on hospitals to increase competition. We have to deal with a lot of other factors that are associated with this that deal with distribution of health care, and to get the patient back involved in this process and get the insurance companies and third-party payers out of the way. One of the things we're seeing out where I live is we're seeing a lot of concierge medicine. This is where you pay a doctor retainer, and then you don't get to see the doctor unless you have right insurance, and then you can deal with that. But it's like having a retainer for a lawyer. These are all things that can be done. I would like to see right now the Supreme Court take a look at the law as it exists today and see if they would come to the same decision.
Matt Whitaker.
We need to repeal it. We need to defund it. We need to dismantle it. We need to pull it out by the roots. As a small business owner, I have seen the Affordable Care Act up close. I have talked to other small business owners that have had to lay off an employee to cover their increased health insurance risk. I've seen farm couples that are well beyond their childbearing age, who are required to carry maternity care now under this law. It has been amended by executive fiat almost 40 times by this president. But what do we replace it with? We replace it with the things that we know that work. Price transparency for doctors and hospitals makes a lot of sense. So does putting the patient in charge of their healthcare dollar, so that they know when they spend for a doctor or for a hospital how much it costs, and that it's coming out of their money, not some third-party bureaucrat that makes these decisions. We need to allow the sale of insurance across state lines. We need to encourage health savings accounts. And we need to allow small businesses to band together to pool their resources and spread their risk. And I saw this at Merit Resources when I worked with them. There's lots of free market ideas that work that we didn't even try yet.
Scott Chabin.
Here I am again, the last person answering the question. I do agree. It is the law, and that is the dangerous part of it. So the very first thing we have to do is we have to put some serious attention into this race, because whoever not only wins this nomination, but whoever ends up winning this election gets a 6-year term. There's been bad laws on the books before, and the biggest one that I can think of took over 10 years to get repealed. This is a 6-year term. And not to put it in the terms of their candidate, but again, one of the terms that we talked about was tort reform. You have to have somebody that's willing to go to DC to actually fight for tort reform, and vote for the background, the experience, and the voices of Iowans, and not the background, experience, and voice of a hotel room full of drunken Texas trial lawyers. allowing small businesses to pool together are good things that we can do. Allowing individuals to pool together are things we can do. Allowing people to purchase insurance across state lines. Those are all things we can do, as well as health savings accounts. So, sorry to sound redundant, but I think most of us are here on the same, agreement on the same points here.
With permission from you, gentlemen, I'd like to fit in one more question if we could have a minute response. This is our last one. I'm going to bleep 2 words, though. How are you going to be effective in that bleep Washington to do me any good? So I'll change the 2 bleeps to dysfunctional Washington. How are you going to be effective? Sam?
I look at the United States Senate. I used to play a lot of baseball, and I can answer this quickly. I know that when the chemistry in the dugout has a lot of impact on the outcomes on the field. I think if you change the chemistry in the Republican conference of the United States Senate, you can change the outcomes of the United States Senate. That's what I intend to do. I'm not naive enough to think or have an ego big enough to think that I can go to Washington to change the country or to change Washington. But I can start the process of changing the chemistry in the dugout of the Republican Party, and that includes on who I'll vote for in the leadership of that party when I get the opportunity on January 5th of 2015.
Matt Whitaker, how are you going to be effective in dysfunctional Washington?
Right. I have the fight and the energy and the experience to go to Washington, D.C. and not just be a vote, but to be a voice for the conservative principles that work. One Republican vote in 1995 would have got us a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution and changed the trajectory of our country. One Republican vote would have stopped the Affordable Care Act. One person, one senator from Iowa matters. And I would be humbled to go to be that voice for you against the bleep, Washington.
Scott Shaven, how are you going to be effective in Washington, D.C.?
Not drink the water from the Potomac. I come from a career, my entire background has been one of teamwork. Whether it was playing sports, whether it was shooting missiles, or whether it was turning small businesses around, individual stores around, we worked together as a team, and I say we because it took all of us, whether it was myself sitting in the manager's office or myself sitting on the sales floor or the receptionist or the people up in the office, everybody working together as a team. I tell people that I'm bilingual. I speak the language of employer and employee, and I can do that dialogue and not have any one party walk away from the table feeling slighted. Anybody that tries to convince you that they turned around a store or a business or an industry all by themselves, they either have no idea what it takes to be a member of a team, or they need a lesson in what it's like to be humble. But I would work together as a team. Thank you.
Mark Jacobs, how are you going to be effective in D.C.?
You know, it's an interesting question, and I got that same question before I joined Reliant Energy in 2002. A lot of my closest friends said, why would you ever go jump on that sinking ship? The banks are going to be in control. The feds are coming in investigating the company. What possible difference could you make? And I tell you, what I learned from that experience is how to roll up your sleeves and take the emotion out of it and work with people, stand firm on your principles, but at the end of the day, build relationships with people who have different points of view and learn how to make progress. And I think that's what I see that's missing in Washington, D.C. today. We have this toxic environment of name-calling and bitter partisanship, and the bottom line is nothing's getting done. And I think if we want different results, we're going to have to send a different type of leader there. And I think somebody who has a demonstrated track record in the private sector of knowing how to build coalitions and get things done is the type of person that I think we need today.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for all the questions, too. We had several more, but time is calling us, and so we want to end this great night, this great debate for quality candidates with your closing comments. 1 minute. We'll start with you, Matt Whitaker.
I'm running on a platform of standing up for freedom and liberty. Freedom from Obamacare, a $1.2 trillion wet blanket on our nation's economy. Standing up for economic freedom. The United States is now ranked in the world 12th for economic freedom. Right behind that beacon of economic freedom, Estonia. I'm also standing up for religious liberties. This administration has its eyes set, and you don't have to read the paper very far to see what's happening to places like Notre Dame and Hobby Lobby and Little Sisters of the Poor. And this administration isn't just looking at your First Amendment freedoms, they're looking at your Second Amendment freedoms, and we have a government that is now violating your Fourth Amendment freedoms. I believe that standing up for freedom is the calling of our time. Join me in this effort. I'm asking for your vote, I'm asking for your support, and I'm always also asking for your prayers. Not for me, but for everyone on this stage and their families. God bless you all. I appreciate the time, and thank you.
Scott Shaven.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you, Mr. Grunder, for hosting this great event. I am truly humbled, and I am pleasantly surprised at the turnout. I don't think any one of us on stage here tonight was expecting to be talking to 100 or more people. Otherwise, you probably would have had 100 or more % attendance, but that's besides the point. My campaign motto is I'm an everyday Iowan ready to represent everyday Iowans every day in the United States Senate. And by that, if I'm fortunate enough to become your next United States Senator, my goal would be to have a 100% attendance record and a 100% voting record. My parting thought for you is this. The best advice I've received on this campaign trail is the same advice I received when I got into sales, and it's the same advice I got when I got into management. And that is to be a good listener. As you vet some of these candidates, you're going to come across some people that are nothing more than professional talkers. But you will have to ask yourself, for my next United States Senator, do I want someone that's just going to talk to me, or someone that is actually going to listen to me? I thank you for your time, and I ask you for your support. Thank you very much.
Mark Jacobs, your closing comments.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I very much appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. You know, at our house, my wife Janet is an incredible cook. And so she has cooking duties and I got cleanup duties. And not long ago, I was doing the dishes after dinner and our kitchen sink started to back up. And I told Janet, I said, I can fix this problem. And so I got out the plunger and I'm working away on that clog in the kitchen sink. And before you know it, we had water coming out from everywhere underneath the sink. The moral to the story is, if you have a plumbing problem, call a plumber. You need someone with the right skills and experience for the job. Folks, we have a fiscal disaster in our nation's capital. Our federal government is spending way more money than it takes in. Our national debt that we're passing on to our children, our children's children, is growing by leaps and bounds every day. Now, I'm very optimistic on the long-term future of America. All of the problems we have here, these are all fixable problems. But we need to send people to Washington that have experience in dealing with the types of problems that our nation faces today. I've had that experience in the private sector. I've demonstrated that I can work with people and build coalitions to turn around a large company. Now, there's a few more zeros on the end of the balance sheet here at our federal government. But all of the problems we're facing are very similar to problems that I've already tackled in my career successfully. Thank you all again very much for being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Sam Clovis.
It's always great to get back here to Muscatine County. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. I want to talk to you about a couple of things here. One of those is commitment. You have to have a commitment to this, and you have to be committed to this country to do this. And I am committed to this country because I have been since the day I was 17 years old and I raised my hand for the first time to to swear an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. I have done that. When you do that for the first time, you never stop doing it the rest of your life. I believe that the Constitution is absolutely fundamental to this discussion. The Constitution is what we ought to be committed to. The Constitution is what we have to constrain our government. The Constitution is what will guide us to limit the government that we have and its intrusion on our lives. The Constitution will help us protect the liberty that we have in this country. I have sworn an oath to that Constitution, and I will tell you why I will never turn my back on the state of Iowa and why I will never change once I get there. Because what you see is what you're going to get. I've been twice the speed of sound. I've seen the curve of the earth. I've been 1,000 miles an hour this far off the ground, and I'm married to the love of my life. They got nothing there that I don't already have. Thanks for having us here tonight. I really appreciate it.
For the four gentlemen, in regards to our crowd here, this is for Congressman Braley. Not too bad for just farmers, just entrepreneurs, and just citizens of this state. I hope he doesn't forget who he represents. But how about one more round of applause?
I just wanted to say something to everybody that came out tonight. I've met all these guys in the past, good guys, all the candidates I know pretty much. The reason I did this is for you folks, more so than them, so you have a chance to talk to them. Tell your friends about this. Next time I'd like to have 200 people in here for a forum like this, and we can continue to have the national candidates up here on the stage in front of us. So please, and be watching in September. After the primaries are over, there'll be another event. It'll be a little more money to get into than this one was, but it should be a good one. And also, as far as donations, I didn't do this to make money for the Republicans, and definitely not for myself. But if you are making a donation, there are some envelopes on the corner of this first table, and there's a little basket you can put the envelope in. So again, thanks to everybody for coming out. Feel free to stay until Paula comes by and kicks us out. Not Paula, I'm sorry, Marcia. She may come by and kick us out eventually, but any of the candidates that want to stay, the people that want to stay and talk, and there's still food for anybody that's hungry. So again, thank you very much. Have a good evening. Drive safe.